Thank you so much, everyone, for joining our webinar. My name is Mark Kreswick. I'm the Senior Policy Director at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. Delighted that you were able to join us to hear more about the international commitment that was made by 132 nations, including the United States, who committed to working collaboratively together to make energy efficiency the first fuel and to double the rate of energy efficiency improvement across the world. Today, we'll be joined by the International Energy Agency to speak a little bit about the global perspective on what this commitment means, as well as take a deep dive into some of the key policies and opportunities here in the United States and the benefits of doubling the pace of energy efficiency. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping things to share. We are recording this webinar and we will make it available to everyone who has registered within a couple business days. We will also provide the slides to everyone who has registered. To ask a question at any point during this webinar, please submit it using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will see those and we will have a Q&A session for about half the webinar. And so make sure you can ask those questions anytime. We can also see them and answer them in the chat. So pay attention to the Q&A after you ask your questions. You can also upvote other people's questions that were asked to increase them in the likelihood that we ask those questions first. You can also talk and chat with one another via the chat button in the webinar. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So let me, without further ado, introduce Dr. Nicholas Howarth. Nick is a policy analyst with the Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions with the International Energy Agency. Nick leads the IEA's Energy Efficiency Market Report, which is the IEA's primary annual analysis on global developments in energy efficiency markets and policy. Dr. Howarth, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I'll just bring up my slides. So good morning, colleagues in America, and good evening from here at IEA headquarters in Paris. It's great to see so many of you online today as we gather to discuss recent developments around energy efficiency globally and in the United States. This is a very timely discussion as following COP28 at the end of last year in Dubai, we saw a historic level of political commitment to progress a range of clean energy goals, and among them, an unprecedented profile for energy efficiency with a commitment to double the global rate of progress. So there couldn't be a better time for having this discussion today, and I'd like to thank the ACEEE for convening us here. So today I'll be drawing a lot upon the analysis within the IEA's Energy Efficiency Market Report, which really had very much a major theme in its analysis around the doubling pledge and target to double progress. And so in today's presentation, I'll be going into a bit of the detail behind what is the doubling target and the policy and analytical background that led to the COP28 decision. I'd like to show some of the recent trends versus what is needed to get onto this path of doubling, whether it's at the country level, within technologies and sectors and policies, and conclude with some of the next steps in terms of where to next. Now that we have the pledge, how will we be tracking progress and helping countries strengthen policy ambition, as well as some important milestones along the way. So much of this can also, if you are interested in knowing more, can be found in Energy Efficiency Market Report, which is available on the IEA website for free download. So in a nutshell, when we talk about doubling progress on energy efficiency, we are referring to the global average annual rate of improvement in energy intensity each year this decade to 2030 relative to the 2% level, which was experienced in 2022. So this was the quite specific background or analysis that went into when we talked about where we're starting from and where we're looking to go to reach this 4% annual improvement each year this decade. So just to recall, energy intensity is the amount of primary energy consumed in the economy for an amount of GDP. So a 2% improvement means that in 2022, 2% less energy was needed to produce the same amount of economic activity as the year before. So the target, that it was global target, and some of the key benefits of increasing from this 2 to 4% level included around 7 gigatons of CO2 savings to 2030. This is about half of all CO2 savings. Energy bills, because energy demand would be lower, energy prices would be lower, as well as less energy being consumed, could be reduced by around a third, as well as all the jobs benefits from installing, construction, manufacturing, building activity that would be required to step up progress to this level, and the energy savings equivalent to around twice what is currently consumed in the EU. So we see really large benefits from this doubling goal. And so with that, it was taken forward to the COP28 in Dubai towards the end of last year in November, December. So with that, it was a real, the IEA was delighted to see the COP28 agreement, which saw a historic agreement to double efficiency progress. In the COP28 final text, it referred to a doubling of the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. And this built upon momentum that was gathering during the COP28, with several days before 132 countries signed on to the Global Renewable and Energy Efficiency Pledge. And this was somewhat a bit more specific to commit to work together in order to collectively double the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvements from around 2% to over 4% every year until 2030. And this, throughout the year leading up to COP, was supported by growing momentum. In particular, in June of last year, we held the IEA's 8th Global Conference on Energy Efficiency in Versailles, which saw the Versailles Agreement to double energy efficiency progress, which was signed by 40 or endorsed by 46 countries, as well as several references within India's G20 and Japan's G7 presidencies. And so the COP28 commitment to double efficiency progress came as a result of this growing calls and level of engagement throughout 2023. And if we go back to the beginning, where the analytical foundations were laid, it was very much from the WEO landmark, the WEO Net Zero report in 2021, which saw which helped to reach the 1.5 degree climate stabilization target, an energy pathway which is consistent with an annual rate of energy intensity improvement at 4% on average each year to 2030 was seen. And this was picked up in our energy efficiency market report of that year, where we did a deep dive into the energy efficiency dimensions of achieving the net zero transition, where we showed that when we look at long-term average trends, the rate of progress would need to double from those levels to match this gain of 4% seen in the IEA net zero scenario. And so there was obviously a lot of work and background that went to get to achieve this the result that countries signed on to at COP28. And so we were really delighted that IEA was able to support that through this analysis and holding these events throughout the years leading up to the COP decision. So as part of this, of course, it wasn't just about increasing a number of energy intensity from, say, 2 to 4%. Underneath that, there are sectors, industry, transport and buildings, and literally hundreds of technologies that will need to be, efficiency will need to be improved, actions will need to be made, and rate of change within the economy to improve efficiency accelerated. And within the net zero report, which was tracked as well within our efficiency work at the IEA, we gathered some of these over 40 major global avoided energy demand milestones were identified. And importantly, these milestones, the vast majority of them result in cost savings to consumers, overall lowering energy bills. And so this was very much part of helping build momentum. And in addition to those sectors, several of the key measures that support this acceleration in energy intensity progress include fuel switching, most notably electrification and renewables, but also towards clean cooking in emerging economies. Technical efficiency, which is more the commonly understood efficiency of improving appliance standards, strengthening vehicle average fuel consumption, and finally other avoided energy demand measures such as behavior change and resource and material efficiency, very important. So as I said earlier, one of the reasons why the doubling progress is so important, particularly in the short term, is that the energy savings result in around 50% of emissions reductions in the IEA net zero scenario by 2050. And if we look at where, how countries have performed relative to this 4% level, going back to last decade, from the 2010 to 2019, what we see here along the x-axis is the size of or the significance of each country in terms of their share of energy consumption in the global economy, with the United States, European Union, and China making up around half of global energy demand. And one country one major G20 country having reached this 4% level during this time period. And as you can see, there is a range of performance across G20 and non-G20 countries. And the challenge will be to lift this level up from the 2% average, which was achieved in the last decade before the onset of COVID, up to the 4% level in each year envisaged this decade. And so another important point to keep in mind, that the 2% that we saw in 2022 and used as a baseline for setting this target is also almost exactly the same as the average experienced last decade across the world between 2010 to 2019. So this helps us understand where countries have been and the challenge that will be ahead in terms of moving up to that higher level. However, the good news is that this 4% annual improvement in energy intensity was hit by almost all countries at least once last decade, and almost half of all countries achieved it at least 3 times. And so it's not something that is out of reach. The challenge will be to consistently move to 4% or above to achieve that average level over the course of the decade, as energy intensity tends to move up and down according to different conditions, the weather, the state of the economy, as well as these technical efficiency drivers for avoided energy demand in energy across the year. So stepping back again to some of the recent progress versus where we would be going to in this 4% world. So last year in the market report, we looked into, although we saw energy efficiency policy momentum building in most countries around the world, energy intensity progress in 2023 actually slowed to 1.3%, driven by higher global energy demand of 1.7%. This was up on the year before, where energy demand grew by 1.3%. And here we see also the 3 scenarios that the IEA tracks at different levels of energy intensity, which will have different implications for the level of energy demand this decade, energy demand growth this decade moving forward. So I'd like to look into this a little bit more in this chart here, where we see in the left-hand side of figure the elements that go into energy intensity progress, GDP on one hand, and primary energy growth on the other. And we see that last decade, global economic growth of just over 3% resulted in energy demand growth by around 1.4% per year. And so in our scenarios that we explore, faster energy efficiency improvements, shown in the right-hand side of the chart, of 2%, 3%, or 4%, will really dictate the future of energy demand, whether it will be a high energy demand, a moderate energy demand, or a lower energy demand future going forward. And so this increased ambition around energy efficiency really has major implications for energy security, energy prices, with lower energy demand, lowering the pressure on oil, gas, coal, power prices that have contributed to inflation and the cost of living crisis in the last couple of years. So we're increasing energy efficiency to this 4% level, not just for its own sake, but really because of these many extra these benefits that it provides to both the climate, people's standards of living, as well as the economies around the world. And the good news is that we're already seeing highly efficient technologies like heat pumps and electric vehicles already contributing to a peaking of fossil fuel demand in certain end uses and sectors. And here we see the number of countries where residential gas demand has peaked on the one hand, and it's worthwhile noting that in the United States, residential gas demand is peaked in 2014 with the latest data showing that it's around 8% below this level now. So we really have an increasing number of countries where we're seeing a peaking and declining of residential gas demand, and even more so when it comes to gasoline demand, which goes into powering the world's vehicle fleet. And here we've seen over 90 countries which have experienced a peaking or a decline in gasoline demand. And this is really as a result of standard energy efficiency, more efficient vehicles, but also more recently, the increasing influence of electrification in lowering that fossil fuel demand. And according to our data, US gasoline demand peaked in 2018, and last year we estimate it was around 4% below this mark. And so these efficiency policies are really already having an impact on peaking of fossil fuel in many markets around the world, and we'll be continuing to track this very closely. Another piece of good news towards achieving this 4% target is that many of the policies and technologies for doubling already exist. And here we show some of the analysis from our market report of minimum energy performance standards, where the blue bar represents the range of minimum energy performance standard, where 100 represents a level of efficiency needed in the net zero scenario. And the green dot at the top represents the typically available in the market today, easily to access best in-class product. And so what this shows us is that in many jurisdictions, policies have already moved up to the levels needed to achieve the energy savings for these specific end uses. But a lot more progress needs to be made, and that is where international cooperation to move up the average minimum energy performance of end-use technologies will be needed, as well as many of these products are already available now in the market, irrespective of those minimum standards. And so the doubling target is achievable when we look down also to the policy and technology level. And that's a very important point to emphasize. So moving forward in terms of the next steps, the IEA will be, of course, tracking the COP28, tracking progress towards the COP28 target to double the annual rate of efficiency progress this decade. And underneath that, of course, there's a whole range of sector and subsector elements that we look at that contribute to the overall doubling. So we'll be looking at where we are now using the most current data, and also with a view to the forward-looking trends to see how we're tracking to those 2030 goals. Of course, a big part of this is strengthening policies, and we'll be working with governments around the world to take the best practice examples where progress is being made in different areas, whether it's heat pumps, electric vehicles, industry, building codes, and the combination of policies across regulations, information, and incentive programs that complete the package of energy efficiency policies that is really needed to drive that progress forward. So that type of policy best practice learning will be really, an exchange will be really crucial to lifting progress moving forward. And finally, along the road to implementing the COP28 pledge. One of the next very important events will be the IEA's 9th annual Global Conference on Energy Efficiency, which will be held on the 21st to 23rd of May in Nairobi, where a key moment will be, an opportunity will be made to look into the implementation side of moving towards this doubling goal, as CEOs from many of the world's largest producers and manufacturers of energy efficient products will gather, as well as ministers, the largest ever gathering of ministers to discuss specifically energy efficiency. And we saw the major benefit of having this group gather last year in setting forward the agenda and providing the momentum to give the political results whether it's at the G7, G20, and ultimately at the COP28 level. So with that, I'd like to wrap up and hand over to Mark for a look into what's happening in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Nick, there we go. All right, really appreciate everything that the IEA has done to drive the level of progress that Nick was just describing. So again, my name is Mark Creswick. I am the Senior Policy Director at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. If I can get my screen to do the right setting here. Just a second. Oops. It is not letting me do that. All right. One moment. Let's try this again. Well, I guess we're just gonna have to go with this setting unless I can figure out the proper. Right, it's not letting me just get rid of this taskbar.
If you go into display settings,
I can't actually get there, right? I can't see it in my screen. That's the problem. There we go. Got it. All right. There we go. All right. Now we're in the right setting. Thank you. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or ACEEE, is the largest and nonprofit research, advocacy, and technical assistance organization focused on energy efficiency in the United States. Just turn that off. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what doubling energy efficiency progress means in the United States specifically. As Nick noted, for the past decade, from 2010 to 2019, the United States achieved about an average of 2% improvement in primary energy intensity. But the good news is last year, in 2023, we achieved about 4% improvement in energy intensity. I will note most of that was actually due to milder weather in most parts of the United States. But nevertheless, we've demonstrated that we can achieve the levels of improvement in energy intensity necessary to reach the goal that was committed to globally. Back in 2019, my colleagues at ACEEE actually did an analysis, our Halfway There report, which took a look at the level of contribution of ambitious energy efficiency policies could make to reducing climate pollution in the United States by 50%. That energy efficiency's contribution alone could get us halfway to the required reductions to meet the net zero scenario that the IEA has laid out and is necessary to avoid the worst impacts of climate disruption. And it happens that the level of energy intensity improvement that is consistently maintained by achieving that goal is, again, that doubling of energy efficiency progress of 4%, going from 2% to 4%, is what is necessary for energy efficiency's contribution to avoiding the worst impacts of climate disruption globally. So within that study, we took a look at what were the opportunities from a technology perspective, from an energy efficiency perspective, that would be necessary to achieve that goal, as well as the policies that would be necessary to implement in order to achieve those opportunities and meet those goals. So that covers all the different sectors, whether it's buildings, industry, transportation, cross-cutting sectors, the power sector. What are the policies that can be put into place to achieve these goals? And what we found is that there's a significant contribution. You can think of it very much as, across this, every sector of the economy, we can make progress and need to make progress to reach that doubling goal. So I'm going to dive deep on what are the current policy opportunities in the United States, what are the benefits of those policies, and where do we still need to make more progress in order to be on track to double energy efficiency progress. But just to step back one moment and remind you, the incredible benefits of doubling energy efficiency progress across all these different sectors is, first and foremost, a dramatic reduction in climate pollution. Again, getting us halfway to where we need to be going just on the backs of energy efficiency alone across these different sectors. But it also boosts the economy, as Nick noted, the incredible benefits of saving tremendous amounts of money, more than $700 billion in energy savings alone in 2050, right? From implementing the kinds of policies that are necessary to meet this goal. Again, across all these sectors, and you can start to get a sense of which of these policies has the biggest impact in terms of saving money, improving the economy, putting more money back in the pocketbooks of households and companies across the United States. So some of those biggest policies include the vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards that the Environmental Protection Agency is currently considering, and vehicle energy efficiency standards. Those are the single biggest policies that will do the most to put money back in the pocketbooks of households, of individual consumers, and do the most to reduce energy use and improve energy efficiency and energy improvement. Right now, the EPA is currently considering finalizing the proposed standards, both for car and light trucks, SUVs, as well as medium and heavy duty vehicles. So that's the biggest policy opportunity currently facing the United States this year, right now, is getting that those standards across the finish line this year. Another humongous bucket, the second biggest bucket after transportation and vehicle greenhouse gas and energy efficiency standards, are appliance standards. The Department of Energy has been working through dozens of appliance standards across different product sectors, and it is racing to finalize those appliance standards, which again, tremendously save energy, save money at very little cost to the economy, tremendous benefits in growing the economy and saving households money. The third policy opportunity this year are building energy codes. Many people may not be familiar with the fact that a suite of federal agencies, including HUD, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, which oversees the government-sponsored enterprises of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Collectively, these four agencies and the government-sponsored enterprises back about 3/4 of all mortgages originated in the United States, right? So the federal government and federal agencies and government-sponsored enterprises are financially supporting the vast majority of home purchases in the United States. Those agencies are at risk right now from the financial implications of extreme climate change and extreme weather events. If you look at the flooding, the wildfires, extreme heat, extreme cold, the kinds of extreme weather that's exacerbated by climate change threatens to destroy homes, to damage homes, as well as those living inside homes. When we look at the possibility of the power going out in an extreme heat situation, for instance, that Phoenix, Arizona saw this past summer, where the high temperature over the summer for a month straight was more than 110 degrees. If the power had gone out in that scenario, up to half the population of Phoenix could have experienced medical distress, right? So the threat of these extreme events to our fundamental housing finance system and to ourselves and our health and our well-being is immense. So the opportunity here for these federal agencies is to ensure that every new home that they're supporting, that they're backing, is prepared for these extreme weather events, and that it's doing its part to improve energy efficiency, keep people healthy, comfortable, and safe inside their home longer because of the increased insulation, tighter shells, of up-to-date modern building codes. This is one of the biggest opportunities for policy progress toward doubling energy efficiency in the United States today. Finally, the Inflation Reduction Act, unprecedented levels of spending across all sectors, industrial, buildings, transportation, to help people save money, improve lives, benefit the economy, as we've seen just incredible responses to more manufacturing, clean energy manufacturing here in the United States, making sure that all of the work that we're doing to deploy that funding is aligned with improving energy efficiency and lowering climate pollution and benefiting the economy. So those are the biggest policy opportunities the United States faces this year to meet those goals. But that leaves a lot of things yet to make more progress on. And so when we look ahead, where are the areas for states and local governments to make more progress on in the coming years? One of those areas is very much building performance standards for existing buildings, right? So the federal government can do a lot to support new construction, but there's a lot more opportunity at the state and local level for reducing climate pollution, improving energy efficiency and energy intensity in existing buildings. Clean heat standards, as we look at heating as one of the largest sources of climate pollution in the United States, ensuring that we are transitioning to heat pumps and other clean heat opportunities is a major opportunity for states and local governments coming up in the coming years. Industrial process changes and electrification. The industrial sector is one of the largest sources of climate pollution and a key opportunity for improving energy efficiency, reducing primary energy intensity through products like industrial heat pumps. So we've talked about heat pumps when it comes to buildings, but also really big heat pumps that can heat steam and hot water up to temperatures that can be used in industrial processes, can dramatically improve the energy efficiency of the industrial sector. Utility energy efficiency programs, again, at the state level, where utilities are operating energy savings programs where they're putting money, rebates, incentives, working with households and companies and businesses to improve their energy efficiency and reduce the overall amount of electric demand needed to meet peak demands is another major opportunity. And finally, transportation planning and funding. It's not just about electric vehicles. It's also about how we're designing our communities and the level of funding that's available for smarter transit, smarter growth is another key opportunity in the coming years. But it's not just about improving energy intensity and improving energy efficiency. It's also about centering the needs of those who have been most burdened by underserved by our current energy system. Right now, there are more than 26 million households in the United States that earn less than 80% of their area median income. 26 million households under 80% AMI that are burning fossil fuels inside their homes. They might have a gas furnace or a gas stove. So on average, those households pay more than 9% of their income on energy. That's more than double the average energy burden of every other household, right? So those are the households that are faced with shutoffs, utility shutoffs, when they're threatened with their power going out because they can't afford their energy. They make many times trade-offs between what to afford. If they can't keep their lights on, Can they put food on the table? Can they afford medicine? Do they keep their temperature inside their home at unsafe levels during extreme heat and extreme cold situations? These are the households that are most important that we need to focus and prioritize to improve energy efficiency, to lower their energy costs and lower the burdens that they face. One of the biggest challenges going forward in that quest to prioritize energy, the most energy burdened households, is as we transition off fossil fuels, as we switch to heat pumps and electric vehicles, particularly as we electrify buildings, the price, you will see, so this is the Office of People's Counsel, the consumer advocate in the state of Maryland, modeled what that transition must look like, what it takes to actually meet these goals. And they found you essentially stopped selling any fossil fueled appliances by the year 2025. Exactly the same thing that the IEA found in their net zero scenario that Nick talked about earlier. You simply need to stop selling fossil fueled appliances by 2025. And as that happens, the amount of fossil fuels used for heating in buildings goes down dramatically over the course of the following years as households switch off the electric system. The use of gas declines dramatically. But as you have fewer and fewer customers remaining on the gas system, gas prices go through the roof. So over the course of 10, 15 years, Maryland Office of People's Counsel found that the price for gas and alternative gaseous fuels, so as if you instead try to decarbonize the gas system, would triple. By the time you reach 2050, for those households remaining on the system, the price of gas could increase tenfold because you have fewer and fewer customers paying for the distribution of the gas system. That cannot fall. Those prices increases cannot fall on, again, those who are already most energy burdened in our communities. So they have to be the first to transition. We have to prioritize low-income households, those most energy burdened in this transition. And what that looks like includes funding for comprehensive retrofits. So not just electrification, but energy efficiency, solar, the ability to access electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That's the opportunity the Inflation Reduction Act and all the utility energy efficiency programs in the country is prioritizing those who are most energy burdened with these comprehensive approaches. It also means planning for this transition, to stop spending more money on maintaining a deteriorating gas system instead of repairing and replacing pipes, to instead invest in community electrification, where you can electrify an entire community, take it off the gas system so you don't have to keep spending on gas pipeline repair and replacement. It means consumer and tenant protections in this transition. So as we invest in low-income households, to make sure that rates don't go up, that they aren't faced with displacement, and that landlords don't simply make these investments and then move to market rate housing, that they stay affordable, that there are covenants and protections for consumers and particularly renters in this transition. It means ensuring that homes are more resilient, that we're making communities able to withstand the kind of extreme weather that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, and then making sure that the transition is economically inclusive, that jobs are being created, that high family supporting jobs are being created in the communities where these investments are being made for communities and households and individuals that have been historically underserved and haven't had access to the kind of economic opportunities that this can create. So those are the priorities. 2024, we see the opportunity before us with vehicle emission standards, with federal agencies adopting up-to-date modern building energy codes, as well as the opportunities in the future with industrial building electrification. But this transition must be equitable. ACEEE is at the forefront of leading that with our partners. We have a number of partnerships for progress, including our residential retrofits for energy equity program, which is working with the Department of Energy, the Building Upgrade Prize, as well as our partners at Emerald Cities and Elevate, to ensure that low-income households can benefit. It includes the National Energy Codes Collaborative, which is driving progress on state building and local building codes across the country, and the Campaign for Lower Home Energy Costs, which is focused on supporting the federal agencies that can and support the housing finance system. It also includes our Appliance Standards Awareness Project and our Industrial Heat Pump Alliance, as we're covering the full suite of sectors with partnerships to reach the goal of doubling efficiency progress. There are plenty of opportunities for you to engage with us, including our hot air and hot water forums in March, our summer study on energy efficiency in buildings, summer camp for energy nerds, if you haven't been, or energy efficiency policy forum, as we look at what the implications of the November elections might be for continued progress to achieve these goals in the country. So with that, we'll open it up for Q&A. Take a look at what kind of, I'm going to stop sharing here so we can see what questions have come in. So thank you. All right. Thank you so much. It looks like Nick has been answering a lot of questions in the chat here. Maybe to start with one from, it is apparent that in the US, political parties have lined up on opposite sides of the issue of global warming causes. Would it be of value to everyone to set some type of new equation or measure which all reasonable people can understand, tying at the obvious climate change, which are easily measured and understood by everyone? It's a great question. I think the key is, the benefits of energy efficiency when it comes to households, the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act across the country are not lined up on party sides, right? We've actually seen more benefits for those in states that have historically been more conservative. So I think it's the economic opportunity, economic progress, the ability for people to save money that's most important here. So Nick, I don't know if you have any thoughts as you look globally at what has been most helpful for making progress across the world, the messages and the issues that have enabled political decision makers to commit to the IEA goals. What's been most salient for you and your work?
So I think, the first point to make is that energy efficiency, out of all of the different mitigation measures and levers when we look at climate change, is really one of the most bipartisan, widely held as beneficial as a no regrets type policy, irrespective of anything that you might want to do to reduce emissions to address climate change. Like as I think your work and your presentation really showed very well, is that it's the low income households that are suffering the most from not having access to efficient equipment and houses or cars when it comes to their energy bills and managing their energy bills with a much higher percentage of their incomes being spent on energy demand. So if you want to, if a government is looking to reduce those cost of living pressures and help households when it comes, and businesses when it comes to their hip pockets or competitiveness, programs, whether it's the low income weatherization programs that you have in the United States, or rebates for efficient air conditioners in other parts of the world, or perhaps a grant for lower income households to buy electric vehicles or heat pumps, as we see very common in Europe. Like all of these, depending on how inefficient the initial starting point was in the house or vehicle, can lower energy bills quite realistically by between 30 and 80%. Now, how can that not be something that a politician would support? And it is one of the strengths of energy efficiency, is that it has those multiple benefits in addition to the climate change imperative.
Thank you. Got a question from Bree on a statement I made earlier about the housing market. So the GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, back about half of all mortgages in the United States of America. That's from their data. It varies year to year. It can get as high as 60 or even 70%. Sometimes it goes below that. But when I was referring to 3/4 of the market, that includes the homes supported by HUD, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as VA. All three of those agencies, particularly HUD and VA, back a significant percentage of housing market originations in the United States as well. So collectively, all of the federal agencies and the GSEs collectively are about 3/4 of the housing market. That's right. We've got a question on northernmost climates, and maybe start in the US and then think about globally, Nick. So kind of how does electrification work there? I'll note in the US, some of the fastest progress on heat pumps, for instance, are in places like Maine. The development of cold climate technologies, heat pump technology, has really improved. The DOE ran a cold climate challenge and continues to run it, where a number of manufacturers stepped up for electric technologies that function extremely well in the North. So the technology has improved a lot, and we're actually seeing the same progress globally, I think, Nick, right, in terms of how this is playing out.
Right. I guess in terms of northern, we're talking about cold climates and how some of these electric technologies perform in the cold climate. And I think the one standout case that we always point to at the IEA is Norway when it comes to the penetration. It has the highest penetration of heat pumps in the world, as well as electric vehicles. And obviously the cold does affect things like battery, how efficiently the battery is working, and also has implications for sizing of the heat pump and the insulation of the housing envelope is also a big part of that. But it's a clear case where even in very cold climates, you can electrify deeply, and these perhaps these issues can be overcome.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a couple questions on storage. So quick answer, storage doesn't always improve energy intensity, but as some of the questioners ask, when it can help incorporate more variable renewable energy generation, or can enable a particular electrification technology, it can actually help lower primary energy intensity. And so depending on how the storage is being used, it is a critical component to the transition here, particularly its ability to shift demand to different parts of and increase the overall efficiency of the electric system, as the questioner says. So it is absolutely a vital part of this mix. Nick, anything you want to add on storage?
Yeah, this is a critical issue, and we actually in this year's market report did a deep dive into what we call system efficiency beyond just the device level, but looking also at the timing of when energy is consumed and the type of energy, obviously, that is enabled through these advanced energy management systems. And to cut a long story short, in one of the case studies that we looked into, these sorts of system efficiency effects, integrating your renewables, your battery with a smart building energy management system, just looking at when energy is consumed and the timing issue, we saw reduced a large consumer's energy bill by around 35%. So having these smart systems can really benefit consumers, and you can read more about that in the market report.
Great, thanks. Kingsmill asks a very specific question about your IEA waterfall chart, Nick. So it showed gains to 2030 around 0.7 for efficiency gains are technical. Can you explain what technical meant?
Yeah, the technical efficiency is the efficiency that relates to, say, the improving level of efficiency in the stock of, say, vehicles, or the stock of appliances when it comes to heating and cooling in buildings. So it's that energy use per in the actual device itself at the end use level. So we can say, in contrast, this might be when we're switching to fuels from gas to electricity, or from gasoline to electricity in the vehicle fleet. You do have a large, like sometimes an electric vehicle can use about 30% of the energy of a same sized ICE, and that would be the electrification improvement that comes, and so that would not be included in the technical efficiency. The technical efficiency would be the improvement in the ICE itself, or a more efficient or smaller vehicle, such as, whether it's an ICE or a electric vehicle. That would be a technical efficiency.
Right. We get in a couple questions about refrigeration and air conditioners, and air conditioning as one of the most important technologies here. Nick, any question or any thoughts you have on the importance of air conditioning and refrigeration when it comes to meeting these goals?
So great question, and this is one of the mega themes that we sadly confronting with a warming climate. And last year it was the hottest year on record, and this year already in February we're looking to be moving into an even hotter year. And so when we're dealing with these very hot years, cooling moves into front and center. And what we see is that there's a very tight relationship between temperature and electricity consumption. The more air conditioners that people buy, the more air conditioners that in the community, the steeper the curve with temperature going up and electricity demand going up. And this can put a lot of pressure on the peak demand for electricity grids on the very hot days. And so it underscores the importance of this system efficiency, demand side measures, as well as having more efficient appliances, air conditioners in the market to just lower the level so that in aggregate, it takes the pressure off the grid, because the grid is sized to deal with the peak. And these peaks are increasingly going to happen on the hottest days. And on those days, you'll have your dirtiest coal power plants being fired up to meet those high demands. So the grid will be better at those with the more efficient, lower demand that comes from, and also more flexible to take the pressure off those very high peaks.
Thanks, Nick. We've just got a couple minutes left, so try to get through a couple more questions here. Thanks, everybody, for your engagement. There's a question on ending sales of fossil fuel equipment and transition on a neighborhood basis. Can we point to examples where this type of transition is already underway? There are some increase in the United States. I'll put some in the chat. But globally, neighborhood electrification is definitely something that has already occurred in areas. Nick, do you want to speak to any global experience there?
I may make the point that similar to the US, we see states and cities are often the place where some of these fossil fuel bans, whether it's gas or vehicles within city limits, ICEs are rolling out. And so often these jurisdictions lead the way. But one example in Australia, for example, in Victoria, where they're bringing in bans on new connections for natural gas at the state level, is just one of many. But I think we're seeing more of these types of policies being brought in to deal with both the phase out of fossil fuels and increasing efficiency, as electrification is both a clean energy. Electrification both increases efficiency as well as enables the decarbonization, increased penetration of renewables.
Maybe our final question here. There is some states in the U.S. and certainly globally where decision makers are repealing their energy efficiency mandates. We just saw that in Arizona. That's a process that'll play out over the course of many months. But how can people on this webinar and communities continue to make progress in the face of some of that opposition, Nick?
Well, I think by highlighting, the gains that come from efficiency that are broadly understood and accepted, I think framing efficiency solely as a climate response, while very strong as a climate response in terms of how efficiency benefits people's standards of living, in terms of their cost of living, as well as the most vulnerable in the community, is a very strong case that I think can transcend some of these can transcend some of these more political arguments.
Well, that brings us to the end. So let me just thank you in particular and everyone who brought this webinar together, everyone who's making progress across the world to achieve the doubling energy efficiency goal, to everyone who attended and is engaged in this movement to ensure that we do what the efficiency's part to avoid the worst impacts of climate disruption and prioritize those who are most overburdened and underserved in our communities. Thank you very much. We look forward to future ACEEE webinars. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.